What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Later on today, Summer Game Fest will happen and we should get a ton of announcements. I'm thinking between 30 or 40 games will be highlighted, and what I want to do is go over a whole preview and even talk about some games that are rumored to be there in just a big roundup, so we'll look at that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a new Switch 2 console. Yeah, a different model that is now just kind of out there on Nintendo's website, and we would kind of talk about some of the ramifications and hopes of it maybe reaching a global audience. And we also do have some updated sales numbers for the Switch 2, specifically in Japan, because yes, the price increase is in effect, and you can certainly see it in the number of units that they're selling, but we'll go over all of that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Guys, we're every weekday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time, going over the world of gaming news, trying to keep you up to date. So just know, even if you don't get a notification, there's probably a video here to check out in the morning. And we're going to start today with Elden Ring Tarnished Edition. This is on the Switch 2, and we've been waiting for it for a bit now. It should have already been out, and they had to delay it. Mostly, it seemed like due to performance issues, as we had some of that footage get out there, especially early on, of it kind of struggling along there. With some of the different conventions, especially in handheld mode. But we got the release date. You can see it is coming out August 28th. Now, it's also important to note that the additional content included in the Tarnished Edition will also be available for purchase on other platforms. That'll be a Tarnished Pack DLC, and it'll launch on the same day on other platforms. Okay, so this game is $80, yes, on the Switch 2. And if you look at the other platforms it's on, it's also like $80 because it has the DLC, the Erd Tree, included. And the only thing is I would like to have seen some sort of addition of the game where it's just the base game. Like, that is a lot. That's a lot of game, just that. And also it'll give you an indication if you're really interested in the game at all, because the Souls game, especially like something like an Elden Ring, very different kind of game. So I do wonder how many people would take a chance on this one, or have maybe just already played it and say, I don't really need to go through it again. I want to hear about the Duskbloods, which this is now telling me the Duskbloods, they're thread to needle on this one, because GTA 6 is out there, and that'll be a whole thing to figure out. Are they going to have Duskbloods in 2027? Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get towards the weekend for the podcast, because, of course, there's a direct out there somewhere. We're thinking next week. Also, we got a bit more information around the release timing for the Steam Machine and, in turn, the Steam Frame, and this over on Valve's website. And it's an update over on their Steam community page with Steam Machine and Steam Frame standalone verified. Of course, important, since the Steam Machine verification does help quite a bit when it comes down to, will this game run on the system? And not necessarily just will it run, but are there weird things that happen where you have a pop-up that hits, or it doesn't necessarily recognize maybe the RAM allotment or something, and it doesn't launch. So you'll have one for the Steam Machine and the Steam Frame separately. But to go a bit further, the last thing they do have here in this update says, we're excited for players to try your titles on the new Steam hardware once they launch this summer. Okay, so this is kind of talking to the partner dashboard. Of course, partners who are developing for it here. And all right, so summer is that technically that could run into September. If they go all the way until September and the Steam Machine still has not shipped, that's insane. Like, it is a massive delay, and it becomes concerning, because then it's like, okay, you get through the end of the year, right? That last quarter, that quarter four. As soon as we get into 2027, if Sony and Microsoft are still full speed ahead for the 2027 holiday, the Steam Machine is going to get outclassed very, very quickly by these other systems. And honestly, the pricing might not be that far off. As crazy as it sounds, Valve is clearly dealing with a lot behind the scenes. So are Microsoft and Sony. They do have more economies of scale on their side, especially Sony. So it's going to be interesting to see the Steam Machine and how it stacks up versus something like a PlayStation 6. Especially if they don't have this thing out, I'm going to say, by the end of this month. It's gonna get kind of sketchy. Oh, and it looks like we do have Persona 6 to look forward to here pretty soon, because you can see this is over on social media, where a person is saying that they did get a DMCA takedown request by SEGA, and this was around some of the Persona 6 stuff that was making the rounds, and people were wondering if it was AI generators. I mean, if Sega's out here and they are striking this stuff down, kind of seems like it was probably legitimate. And we have that Xbox show that is happening on Sunday. We tend to see Sega show up at a lot of these Microsoft events, so You put two and two together, you go, okay, Persona 4 Revival, that's been rated, seems like a good spot there, and then maybe they follow up with Persona 6 and the 2027 year end card to close out the trailer. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and this new Switch 2 model that appears to have been spotted. So at the beginning of this year, there was this new model that was found on Nintendo's site in like the code, and people were looking at OSM as a model indicator, and it kind of goes alongside of BEE, which is the model indicator for the current Switch 2 line, and that would include things like Joy-Cons and stuff alongside of the primary system. But this OSM indicator was odd because they're not going to do a Switch 2 Lite in the first year. I mean, the fact that that popped up at the beginning, so January 2026, was very, very odd, but now it makes a lot of sense considering there are some regulations that Nintendo will have to abide by here, especially in the EU, and we can actually see this. This is over on Digital Foundry, saying the European Union is introducing new legislation that, according to Nintendo's website, quote, aims to reduce the environmental impact of the manufacture, distribution, use, disposable, and recycling of batteries and rechargeable batteries. To that end, the firm is implementing measures to comply with these requirements by preparing versions of products to meet the regulation. Okay, so we have BEE, those will receive a new OSM model, which includes the Switch 2 and possibly its Joy-Con controllers. That's something to keep in mind here, okay? So the Joy-Con controllers mass-produced, obviously, and they go alongside of the Switch 2. I'm curious if the Switch 2 Pro controller would also fall into this, but certainly the Joy-Cons would have to because they come with the Switch 2 system. Like it's sort of viewed as one package the way Nintendo sells it, right? So the Switch 2 would have a removable battery and then either Joy-Con then as well. Goes on to say, in addition to creating the new OSM models, Nintendo has an obligation to supply replacement batteries for up to 5 years after the products are discontinued. The legislation is due to come into force in February 18th, 2027, and we're looking forward to checking out the revised Switch 2 model. Yeah, I'm sure Digital Foundry have fun with it. I'll have fun with it too, because I think there's a lot of potential here outside just the idea of, hey, if there's maybe the battery inside your Switch 2 is like swells, and we've seen that with all kinds of devices. People were leaving their PSPs in a drawer for a while, and they go and check, and the battery's ballooned. And the nice thing there, obviously, you can just remove the battery. You just pop the door off and the battery comes right out. But for some of these other devices where it's just sealed inside, and I will tell you this, the Switch 1 and the Switch 2, the battery's like legitimately sealed. It is glued down completely. And the reasoning for that is, I mean, for the main thing, I think, is that Nintendo is, you know what, why don't you send it to us if there's a problem? But also, if you move the Switch 2 around, you won't have a battery that kind of just rattles around. There's just enough space that can happen. But when it comes to a removable battery, you would have like a more like pressure that would just hold it in place, because the user should be able to remove it, and I think that's only a good thing. So what we should see, and if you look at the Switch 2, there are many teardowns out there. I've done one. You can see where the battery is. I think you're just going to have a square door on the back that you most likely need a Phillips head screw, because it's within reason. So a Phillips head screwdriver, it's pretty standard. We've used it, hey, with the 3DS, for example, right? And you remove the door, and then boom, you have a little battery that just slots out, and you can replace it if it goes bad. Or something I'm really hoping happens, third parties get on board and they start offering larger capacity batteries that maybe it makes the back a little larger, or who knows, this would extend to a light model where you're not docking it, or even with the Joy-Cons that are on the either side of the dock, those might have extended batteries. So there's a lot of potential there for third parties. I'm sure do all kinds of cool stuff, but really this is just more control for the consumer and the ability to actually replace the tech inside of your system if it goes bad. And let's face it, batteries tend to be one of the big fail points over time, since they end up degrading and really doesn't become much of a portable unit then. So the only thing here is we'll have to, most likely, I would anyway, have to import the thing unless Nintendo says, you know, we want to streamline our entire process here when it comes to manufacturing. So just from now on, all the Switch 2 systems that we make going forward, or any revisions, a Lite or a Switch 2 OLED, something like that, we'll just have a removable battery back door, so we don't have to play around with different regions and any of that. So that's my hope. Otherwise, you'll probably have to look to Europe, I guess, if you want a Switch 2 system that can have the battery replaced easily by the user. Next up, let's talk about Summer Game Fest. That'll be happening later on today, 5 p.m. Eastern time. And of course, I'll be paying attention to this. I'm gonna go over all the different games that are shown here, and I'll be doing a full reaction video to it as well after it concludes. And then on the podcast Saturday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, we'll be going over everything that was revealed there. And I think it's gonna be quite a bit. That's the thing with Jeff Keighley and his shows. If nothing else, it's going to be like a monsoon of games. There'll be so many. Again, I'm thinking 30 to 40 titles. Are they all going to be interesting or incredible games? Probably not, but most likely you'll see at least a handful that you're excited about. I would figure. But what I wanted to do is go over some of the games that are expected and then some that are currently rumored and would be kind of interesting to see pop up. So we'll start from the top here. We are expecting Star Wars Zero Company. They did announce it'll be there. And so we'll get a trailer with gameplay, the whole thing. But of course, here comes D-Labs with all the information that they're going to tell us anyway, which does include the release date. That'll be August 27th. It's coming out on PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox. It'll be $50 on PC and then $60 on console, so a $10 price bump there if you're picking it up on PlayStation or Xbox. This is the turn-based strategy game that we're kind of thinking it'll be sort of XCOM-like with the Star Wars universe, so I'm interested in that. Clutch, that's the game out of Maverick Games, the open world kind of racing game that we've already seen. They're gonna have another trailer here that I figure we'll be showing off full gameplay for it. Soulframe, all right, so this is a game, they announced there'll be a trailer here. It's like this fantasy follow-up to Warframe, or at least from the Warframe developers, Digital Extreme, so curious to see how that one turns out. There's gonna be a new Fortnite season. I guess they'll show it here. I mean, look, obviously, Epic wants to have all kinds of advertising space, so yeah, you'll probably see Fortnite here, go figure. Okay, some things right now that are rumored, and there's speculation running wild around. Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. A trailer right now is kind of expected. Nate had mentioned it on his podcast. We know how those quote-unquote predictions tend to go here, but I do think they want to have this game out for 2027, especially if we're led to believe right now that's going to be the last full year before the PlayStation 6 hits the market, and I'm sure Square wants to re-release the thing on the PS6, so they get another release out of it if they get it out next year, and I kind of feel like they're also ready to wrap this trilogy up and then move on to maybe something new for a remake, so to me, all the pieces come together. Rebirth is out now. This is another way to kind of bump interest in that on the Switch 2 and on the Xbox, so why not get us started here with the Part 3 trailer for Final Fantasy VII Remake? Get this, ArenaNet, they'll be in attendance. People immediately go, oh, Guild Wars 3? Well, apparently the Guild Wars account is posting about this and teasing something. I forgot all about Guild Wars. I played the first one. The second one I saw, and I was like, maybe. And I just never got into it. It'd be interesting for me anyway, nostalgia wise, because that was the first MMO I remember popping up that was widely marketed as not needing a subscription service like we have with something like World of Warcraft. Okay, Sega, we already know they've been teasing Crazy Taxi. I mean, this has to be the spot for it. I feel like makes a ton of sense. Very interested to see how that works out. Alien Isolation 2, we already know they're working on it. They've been teasing it here and there. Why not? Let's see a trailer for it. Remember Marvel 1943 Rise of Hydra? I think someone a month or so asked about that in the comment of the day. I mean, it's still coming out. I feel like it should be coming out in the next, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 months, hopefully late 26, but the Grand Theft Auto 6 thing keeps throwing a wrench into people's plans, I'm sure, here, so a trailer for that would make sense. Hogwarts Legacy 2, we've been hearing that is something that they are developing, and why not get an announcement here? And then, obviously, Resident Evil Code Veronica Remake. I kind of thought there would be a shot at it at the Sony State of Play. It wasn't. This was the next spot I figured it would be. So, yes, I think we're going to see the Resident Evil Code Veronica remake for the latest line of Resident Evil remake titles. But I think Summer Game Fest is going to be a big show. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and we see some really cool stuff here, so keep an eye out for that one. Again, it will air later on today, 5 p.m. Eastern, and keep an eye out for my reaction video that I put out afterwards, and hopefully we'll have a lot of fun stuff to talk about. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the Famitsu sales charts. This gives us an idea as to sales week to week for the different platforms, and it was going to be interesting this week because this is after the Switch 2 went up in price and is now more expensive than the Japan-only PlayStation 5. All right, so let's take a look. First, we'll start with the games, with Tomodachi Life continuing to lead the way. Another 52,000 copies have sold for that. That's going to be, it's so funny. It's a Switch 1 game. I know it has like the Switch 2 kind of enhancement for it, but that's a Switch 1 game that is going to be evergreen, I bet, for most, maybe all of the Switch 2 life. It is a Switch 1 game, Tomodachi Life. It's going to keep selling. I mean, guys, it hasn't had a full holiday season yet. It's going to be crazy this holiday for that game. Then we have 007 First Light on the PS5, opening at just over 20,000 copies. That feels pretty good, I feel like, looking at that with the PS5 in Japan. Okay, then we have Pokemon Pocopia, Yoshi, and the Mysterious Book. That has now crossed 50,000 copies there physically. Past and Present Rediscovered, that's 6,225 copies there. Mario Kart World, then Demon Kill Demon, that's 3,719 copies. Minecraft, then Past and Present Rediscovered again, that one on the Switch 2. And then Super Mario Party Jamboree, rounding out the top 10. Moving over to the hardware, a massive drop-off for the Switch 2, going from 247,000 systems down to 31,751 systems. So it looks bad, but I will say some people were kind of surprised. They thought it would be lower than 31,000 systems. I do wonder if a lot of the stock also is a factor here, where they went through so much of it in the previous 2 weeks as people were scrambling to get a Switch 2 system before this price drop. But I mean, it's notable. Again, it's going to be more difficult now than ever for Nintendo going forward to sell the Switch 2. So I do think it's paramount that they have, when they have this direct, again, we believe next week, that it is impactful. Like that there are some big time titles, and not even necessarily just games that are coming out right now or in the next 6 months. Maybe they talk about some games that are a year or two off. Just saying, it's not a bad idea in terms of marketing, getting people excited, or continue to get people excited for the system. But still, it's crossed it's coming up right on 6 million systems sold in its lifetime, and I mean, we're right at like the 1 year mark, so pretty good start, I'd say, for the Switch 2, all things considered. Then we have the PlayStation 5 below that, 8,373 systems. The Switch 1, 6,201 systems. And then the Xbox Series, 835. I think it does help that Nintendo was able to get so much supply out to Japan before this price increase happened. And the thing is, it's very likely that we see another price increase for the Switch 2, I'd say probably going into 2027, as it's kind of already been alluded to by Nintendo with Shintaro Furukawa, that this $50 price increase in like the US doesn't cover everything, but also the price increase, which was more so in Japan with that Japan only model, also didn't seem to cover the difference in terms of the rise of component pricing. So again, either things have to kind of be alleviated behind the scenes when it comes to part cost and procurement, or it's just going to be more and more expensive, and again, more and more difficult to sell. I mean, it's not even just Nintendo, it's all these different companies right now. But Sony is kind of like, we sold our PS5s, we're coming up on 100 million systems. Nintendo is in like the prime user acquisition phase, so they got to get creative, and they kind of have, but I think part of that also means they got to have a really good Nintendo Direct, so here's hoping they have some fun stuff up their sleeve to show us next week. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, will Valve have an announcement at Summer Game Fest? Okay, 70% just say no, 30% say yes. All right, so I do look at Valve as sort of the company that just shows up whenever they want on social media and is like, hey, Half-Life 3 is a thing. Or when they did Half-Life Alyx, I remember it was like 5 o'clock my time at night, 5 Eastern, something like that. And they just showed up, hey, Half-Life Alyx is a thing. Like, that's coming out. It's a VR Half-Life game in like the Half-Life universe. So it's going to continue the story or just add more to it. And so just super random. Valve's in an interesting spot because we see the hardware for them, and it's so difficult when things are as expensive as it is. And so the Steam machine, they eventually got to say the price, and maybe it is a situation of, here's Half-Life 3. Everyone's really excited. Also, the Steam machine, kinda $1,100, $1,200, but Half-Life 3. So I do think those have to be paired up, and the fact that they're saying summer now for Steam machine and Steam frame kind of makes me feel like we're not even going to hear about the price in June. So that's kind of discouraging, but hey, I guess if nothing else, they should have a new Half-Life game, so there's that. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Ronan, who says, games used to be $60 and consoles would drop in price instead of going up. Video game crash is just imminent at this point. I would love if you made a video on the game crash and what you think or how it could look or what could happen. I don't know if we're I don't know if we're ever going to see a video game crash, because there's so many games out there and there are so many different ways for people to access games that, I mean, to me, the console is still the primary experience in the living room. We'll see when we get to where Microsoft has their, their Windows or their Xbox experience that makes the console or like the computer more friendly to the living room. Valve with SteamOS has been great in terms of what they're doing, but it still has limitations when it comes to online competitive games that need like kernel level access for anti-cheat. That's just, it just doesn't work. They haven't had support for that. So there are, again, limitations there. But I think a crash would just be more of a correction where you would see a big publisher go under. So like, remember Ubisoft was, I mean, they're still kind of on like on the edge there. But like if Ubisoft went under, I'd go, okay, there it is. That's part of the correction. EA goes under. That's part of the correction. Something like that. I don't know if you're going to see the same situation of Microsoft being like Sega and just exiting the console space, and they become like I don't want to say a smaller, but not as big as they were in the 90s with Sonic or something like that, with the excitement around the character. But I think Microsoft will still be a pretty big player because of what they own. So no, I think gaming will just continue to churn along, and prices for things will just get more and more expensive until we all look at our backlog and go, you know what? I think I'm good for like the next 20 or 30 years. I mean, the backlogs are pretty big right now. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here on a card. Or maybe you want to check out a game that has been ongoing for like 10 years now, and they just keep adding update after update after update, and somehow it's all been free since it first came out. I did a video looking at that, and I'll leave right below. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.